Rain poured in relentless sheets over the cobblestone streets of Valdrin, turning the marketplace into a river of mud and despair. Lanterns flickered, casting trembling shadows on shuttered stalls, while the wind carried whispers of suffering and hunger. Among the scattered puddles, a small figure darted between the legs of weary merchants, her bare feet bleeding and caked in mud. She clutched a worn wooden toy to her chest, eyes wide with fear and determination. "Buy my toy, sir. Mom hasn't eaten in 3 days," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce, a fragile plea against the cruel indifference of the world. The crowd parted instinctively as a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and commanding, yet moving with the silent grace of a predator. His amber eyes burned like molten gold, piercing the rain and the child's fragile heart. The Lycan King, the most feared ruler of the northern wilds, stood frozen, caught between instinct and fascination. The girl's words struck him with an unexpected force, a raw vulnerability that no power or armor could shield him from. For the first time, he felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar and aged to protect, a hunger not born of the wolf within, but of a fragile human soul in desperate need. In that instant, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one awakening inside him. Rain hammered down on the cobblestone streets of Valdrin, turning the marketplace into a maze of mud puddles and flickering lanterns. The city, usually alive with merchants and chatter, had grown eerily quiet under the storm's weight. Only the desperate wandered, clutching whatever meager goods they could sell. A small figure darted between stalls, her bare feet slapping against the slick stones. Her hair, tangled and matted, plastered to her face, and her eyes, large haunted, scanned the crowd with a mix of fear and hope. In her tiny hands she clutched a wooden toy, splintered and worn, yet polished from years of handling. "Buy my toy, sir. Mom hasn't eaten in 3 days," she whispered, her voice trembling but sharp, a plea forged from survival. The man she addressed paused mid-step. He was tall, cloaked in shadow, yet there was a presence about him that made the rain seem to bend away. His eyes, amber and unnaturally bright, locked onto her with a frozen intensity. The Lycan King himself, king of the northern wilds, feared and revered, stood there, utterly still, as if time itself had stilled. The little girl's words pierced him, not with anger or fear, but with a raw, aching vulnerability he had never encountered. He could feel her hunger, her desperation, her fear of losing the only family she had left. A strange, gnawing pull twisted in his chest. "Where is your mother?" he asked, his voice low, resonant, carrying the weight of authority and the edge of something far older, far wilder. She's sick, sir. She can't get up," the girl stammered, her small body shivering, not entirely from the cold. "Please, I just want her to eat." For a moment, the Lycan King said nothing. The marketplace sounds, the dripping rain, the distant calls of merchants, faded into a dull hum as he studied her. This tiny human, so fragile, had no idea she had stirred something ancient within him, a protective, possessive instinct that made his wolf stir under his skin. I don't have much," she continued, holding the toy tighter. "But maybe you can buy it, sir. Please." The king's lips curved slightly, not a smile, not yet, but an acknowledgement of the girl's courage. He reached into his cloak and produced a small, gilded coin, placing it carefully in her tiny hand. The girl's eyes widened, and for the first time that day, a flicker of hope lit her face. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, but even as she backed away, the Lycan King's gaze lingered. She was more than a child in need. She was a spark, a thread of something precious he couldn't ignore. The rain grew heavier, and the shadows deepened. Somewhere beyond the marketplace, wolves howled in the night. But here, in the quiet, wet streets, a bond had been planted, one that would grow into a story of desire, danger, and forbidden connection that even the Lycan King could not foresee. He turned away, but the image of her small, desperate hands gripping that toy haunted him. In the wild, in the kingdom of beasts, he was king, but tonight, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel: human fragility, calling to the beast within. The storm wasn't over, and neither was the story. The rain had eased by the time the Lycan King reached the outskirts of the marketplace. The flickering lanterns along the narrow streets cast long, trembling shadows over the worn cobblestones. He moved with the silent grace of a predator, every step deliberate, his senses sharp. He had to know more. The child's words, her desperation, had lodged themselves in his mind like a thorn. He found the little girl at the edge of an alley, standing before a crumbling wooden door. She hesitated before knocking, her small knuckles rapping nervously against the warped wood. When the door creaked open, a frail figure appeared, her mother, pale, sunken-eyed, clutching a ragged blanket around her shoulders. She bought it," the mother whispered, her voice weak, incredulous, looking at the coin in her daughter's hand. The child nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. A big man. "Hey, he gave it to me." The Lycan King stepped from the shadows, his presence commanding and overwhelming. The mother gasped, instinctively moving in front of her daughter, protective yet too weak to act. "I am he," the king said, his voice low, resonant, carrying both authority and curiosity. "I want to help." The mother's eyes widened, suspicion flaring. Who are you?" "I am the Lycan King," he admitted, not hiding the truth. "And you have my attention." Her breath hitched. The stories of him, the fearsome, ruthless ruler of the northern wilds, had reached even this small, crumbling district. But now he stood before her, not with violence but with a strange, piercing focus, as if the fate of this small household mattered to him personally. "Please, we have nothing." "I can't feed her, I can't feed myself," the mother whispered, voice trembling. "I don't even know why anyone would care." The king stepped closer, the air around him thickening. His wolf stirred within him, claws of instinct urging him to protect, to claim, to assert his power. Yet he restrained himself. He would not frighten them, not yet. "You will eat," he said simply, and with a wave of his hand, servants, shadowy figures from his court, appeared carrying baskets of fresh bread, cooked meat, and warm stew. The aroma filled the small home, lifting the fog of despair from the mother's face. The little girl's eyes widened in awe. You brought it all." The king inclined his head. "No one under my gaze should suffer so." Her mother looked at him, disbelief etched into every line of her face. Why are you helping us?" He paused, studying them, the child small but fearless, and her mother, fragile yet proud. "Because you stirred something in me I cannot ignore," he admitted, his voice dropping lower, almost to a growl. "And because your suffering ends tonight." The mother's lips trembled, unsure whether to cry or bow in gratitude. The little girl, however, did not hesitate. She ran forward and hugged him, small arms wrapping around his waist, not afraid. The king froze, caught off guard by the innocent touch. The wolf inside him roared with need, not just the need to protect, but a strange, knowing desire he had never felt for a human before. I will return," he said finally, voice steady though his heart pounded with a strange mixture of caution and longing. "Do not worry. This night is only the beginning." Outside, the storm clouds had cleared, leaving the moon high and silver in the sky. Wolves howled in the distance, echoing the turmoil stirring within the king. The night had shifted, and with it, the balance of power, desire, and fate had begun to tilt. The little girl watched him disappear into the shadows, clutching the toy he had bought. She did not yet understand who he was, or the power he wielded, but she felt it, a strange, magnetic force that had entered their lives. and somewhere deep in the northern wilds, the Lycan King walked alone, wrestling with emotions he had never known, his mind and heart now bound to the fate of a frail girl and her mother. The Lycan King returned to his fortress under the cover of night. The halls, vast and echoing, were lined with banners of wolves in mid-howl, and the air smelled faintly of musk and iron. But even amidst this grandeur, his thoughts lingered on the small, desperate girl and her ailing mother. He summoned his advisors, their expressions wary as they observed their ruler pacing like a caged predator. "Bring me the reports from the city," he commanded, amber eyes flashing. "I want to know why a family under my domain is starving while merchants prosper around them." The advisors hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. "My lord, the district you speak of, it's riddled with poverty, thievery, and disease. It is unfortunate, but not uncommon." The king's jaw tightened. "Not common enough to let it happen under my rule." His voice dropped to a growl. "I will see to this myself." Back in the small home, the mother tried to feed her daughter. The child's hands trembled as she tasted the warm stew, eyes wide with disbelief. It's real," she whispered, her voice quivering. "Well, we can eat." Her mother sank into the chair, exhausted, tears sliding down her cheeks. I thought we'd never have enough again. But he helped us." The king himself. The girl's fingers brushed the wooden toy, now sticky with stew, but she didn't care. "Hey, he's not scary," she said softly. "Hey, he's nice." Meanwhile, the Lycan King prowled the streets near the district, moving unseen, his senses stretching across the city like a net. He smelled decay, desperation, and greed, the smells of merchants hoarding food, of children wandering hungry. But most importantly, he smelled the mother, weak and hidden, and her daughter, strong in innocence yet fragile in body. He stopped outside a dilapidated warehouse, noticing figures moving silently in the shadows. Thieves, merciless, cruel, exploiting the suffering of the poor. The king's wolf growled low in his throat, ears twitching. He stepped forward, transforming with a fluid motion, his form towering, fur dark and sleek, eyes burning like molten amber. A wave of fear rippled through the thieves as they realized the predator before them was not a man, but something far worse, a Lycan, the king of the northern wilds. Claws slashed through wood, teeth flashed, and a guttural roar tore through the night. By the time the king reverted to his human form, the thieves lay scattered, groaning, terrified. He looked down at the streets and the alley where the mother and child lived, ensuring no harm could come to them again. The following day, the mother ventured out to thank him, clutching her daughter's hand. She found him in the courtyard of his fortress, his presence as commanding as the night before. "Thank you," she said, voice quivering, "for everything." The king's amber eyes softened slightly, though the predator within him never fully rested. "You are safe now," he said, "but do not mistake my mercy for weakness. There are eyes in this city that will never rest, and I will not allow them to touch you again." The little girl tugged at his cloak, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "Will you come again?" The king's lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Yes," he murmured, the word heavy with promise and danger. As they left, the king watched from the shadows, his heart and the beast within, stirring in ways he could not yet comprehend. This was no longer just about protection. It was about desire, about claiming what was fragile and precious, and about a pull toward a human world that was both forbidden and irresistible. The Lycan King returned to his fortress as the sun dipped behind jagged peaks, the sky bleeding gold and crimson. He could not shake the image of the little girl's haunted eyes or the frailty of her mother. Something about their vulnerability called to the wolf inside him, a protective instinct intertwined with a raw, unfamiliar longing. That night he walked the halls alone, the echoes of his boots mingling with the distant howl of wolves. He replayed the girl's words, "Mom hasn't eaten in 3 days." They burned in his mind like a relentless fire. How could such suffering exist in his domain, right under his nose? In the small home, the mother sat by the fire, trying to piece together some semblance of a life. But her past was a chain around her neck, invisible yet heavy. She had fled a ruthless noble who had stolen everything from her, leaving her destitute and hiding in the shadows of the city. Hunger had become a constant companion, and fear a relentless shadow. Her daughter, oblivious to the dangers outside, played quietly with the wooden toy, the one the Lycan King had bought. But even in her innocence, she felt the pull of something larger, something powerful that had touched their lives overnight. The following evening, the Lycan King returned. The mother stepped back instinctively, uncertainty clouding her eyes. But the little girl did not hesitate. She ran forward and hugged him again. "You came," she whispered, clinging to him. "Yes," he replied, his deep voice carrying a weight that seemed to vibrate through the air. "And I will not leave. Not while you are in danger." The mother's gaze flicked to him, suspicion warring with relief. Why do you care? You're a king, feared by everyone. You have no reason to help us." The king's amber eyes darkened. "Because I choose to. Because I will not allow suffering under my watch. And because something about you calls to me." His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning the mother did not yet grasp. Over the next days, the king visited often. He brought food, medicine, and protection, but he also began to ask questions, quiet, probing questions about the mother's past, the hardships she had endured. The mother, wary yet grateful, revealed fragments of her story: the nobleman's betrayal, the forced flight from her home, the years of hiding and hunger. The king listened silently, absorbing every word. The wolf inside him growled with restrained fury, an urge to punish those who had wronged her. But more than anger, there was a growing desire, an almost forbidden attraction to this human woman, who carried both fragility and unyielding strength. One night the little girl slept in her mother's arms while the king stood in the shadows watching. The moonlight caught his profile, the sharp angles of his face softened only slightly by the glow. He felt the stirrings of something he had never allowed himself before, a need not just to protect, but to possess, to claim what was precious and fragile. And yet, a part of him recoiled. This desire was dangerous, forbidden. Humans were not meant to touch the lives of the Lycan Kings, not in the way his wolf demanded. But desire was a relentless force, and the pull toward them was already irresistible. The mother stirred, sensing his presence. You shouldn't be here," she whispered, though there was no fear in her voice, only caution. "I do not fear the consequences," he replied softly. "Nor should you fear me. I am here to protect, to guide, to ensure that nothing ever threatens you again." His words were a promise, but also a warning. Darkness swirled around them, and the storm outside mirrored the tempest growing in his heart. The boundaries between desire, duty, and danger were blurring, and soon nothing would be the same. The night air was thick with the scent of rain and earth as the Lycan King stood at the edge of the little girl's alley, watching over the small home from the shadows. His senses stretched like taut strings, every whisper of movement and faint smell sharpened by his wolf. He had grown restless, not from hunger, but from the growing pull toward the mother and her daughter. Inside the home, the mother stirred uneasily, haunted by nightmares of the noble who had destroyed her life. The little girl slept soundly, clutching the wooden toy the king had bought. For once there was peace. But the Lycan King knew better than to believe peace could last long in a world built on greed, fear, and cruelty. The next morning he returned, not in shadow but openly. The mother's eyes widened, a mix of awe and fear as he stepped into the small room, his cloak dripping with morning dew. "You should not wander alone," he said softly, yet every word carried the weight of command. "The streets are no longer safe." I know," she admitted, lowering her gaze. "But we have no choice sometimes. There is little food left, and the little one must eat." He knelt slightly to meet her eyes, the intensity of his amber gaze sending a shiver down her spine. "Then you shall not lack. I will see to it personally." The child stirred, waking to the sight of him. Her small hands reached for him instinctively. You came again," she whispered, her eyes wide with trust and wonder. "Yes," he murmured, placing a large, protective hand over hers. "And I will continue to come until this danger is gone." That night, as the city slept, whispers of betrayal reached the king's ears. The noble who had ruined the mother's life was not content with her disappearance. He had sent mercenaries, thieves, and assassins to track her down. The king's wolf growled low in his throat, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the halls of his fortress. He could not allow them to reach her. Not after the bond he had begun to form. Not after the pull of desire and duty entwined so tightly around him. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Shadows moved in the alley outside the mother's home, figures cloaked in black, eyes gleaming with greed and malice. The king appeared as if from the night itself, his form towering, fur dark and sleek, teeth flashing in the moonlight. The fight was brutal and swift. Claws tore through wood and stone, fangs ripped through cloth and flesh, and a growl that shook the very air emanated from the king. Every strike, every movement was precise, lethal, a predator defending what he had claimed, whether by duty, desire, or both. When the last assailant fell, silence returned, broken only by the ragged breaths of the king. He turned to the mother and daughter, who watched in awe, fear, and relief. "You are safe," he said, his voice low, carrying both authority and an unfamiliar tenderness. "For now." As the storm cleared, the mother met his gaze. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something more complex, something forbidden and magnetic. She felt the pull of the king's presence, the dangerous allure that seemed to swirl around him like a living thing. The little girl, sensing the tension, clung to her mother's hand. Will he stay?" she asked quietly. The king's amber eyes softened, though the wolf inside him throbbed with need and restraint. "As long as you are in danger, I will not leave. And even when the danger ends, I may not be able to go." The mother's breath caught. Desire, fear, and gratitude collided in her chest. She knew what he was: powerful, dangerous, and forbidden. But she also felt the undeniable pull between them. The night stretched on, shadows dancing along the walls as the king lingered, watching over them. The bond was no longer just about protection. It was about something deeper, more primal, and more dangerous. A desire that threatened to consume them all. Days passed in a tense rhythm of cautious normalcy. The mother and daughter began to eat properly, to sleep without the gnawing fear of hunger, yet a shadow lingered over them, an invisible weight that spoke of past sins and lurking dangers. The Lycan King visited regularly, sometimes at dawn, sometimes at dusk, his presence a constant reminder of power, protection, and something far more intoxicating. The mother noticed the subtle changes in his demeanor. How his amber eyes softened when he looked at her daughter, how his jaw tightened when she showed even the faintest fear, and how a strange, magnetic intensity lingered when he met her own gaze. One evening, as twilight painted the streets in shades of violet and gold, the mother hesitated before speaking. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but laden with weight. "There is something you must know," she said. "Something about why we fled, why we have been hiding." The king's eyes narrowed, his wolf stirring beneath the surface. He stepped closer, towering yet cautious. "Speak," he commanded, every syllable carrying the weight of authority and a hint of danger. She swallowed, gathering courage. "The noble who ruined my life, he is not dead. He has allies. People who will stop at nothing to find me to claim revenge. If they discover where we are, we will not survive." The king's wolf growled low in his throat, a sound that reverberated through the room. "Then they will die before they touch you," he said, voice lethal and unwavering. "I will not allow any harm to come to you or her." He glanced at the little girl, who had crept closer, sensing the tension. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again, flicking back to the mother. That night, as the city slept, the Lycan King moved through the shadows, tracing the threads of danger that threatened the small household. Every whisper, every movement, every heartbeat of the city spoke to him. His wolf prowled alongside him, a relentless, primal presence that demanded protection, possession, and dominion. The mother watched from the window, heart pounding as she saw the king move with a fluid grace, hunting unseen enemies. She realized, with a mixture of fear and fascination, that this man, this creature, was unlike anything she had ever known. Dangerous, unpredictable, irresistible. Days later, the king returned to the home, and for the first time, the tension between him and the mother shifted. There was no danger present, yet the air seemed to hum with electricity. "You fear me," he said quietly, almost gently, studying her face. "And yet, you are drawn to me." She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I do not know what I feel. You are dangerous. And yet what?" His amber eyes burned into hers, and the wolf beneath the surface stirred, sensing the hesitation, the desire, the unspoken longing. Her lips trembled. "And yet, I cannot help it." The king took a step closer, the warmth of his presence pressing against her senses. "Then you shall not fight it," he whispered, voice low, guttural, a mix of command and invitation. "I will take what is mine, with consent, if you dare to give it." The mother's breath caught. The weight of the past, the fear of the noble's vengeance, the awe and terror of the king's presence, all collided with a forbidden desire she had never felt. The boundaries between predator and human blurred, and the storm within her heart mirrored the one raging in the northern wilds outside. As the little girl slept upstairs, unaware of the dangerous currents flowing beneath her mother's roof, the king and the mother stood in silence, caught between instinct, desire, and the undeniable pull of fate. Outside, shadows shifted, the air thick with impending confrontation. The next days would bring not just romance, but betrayal, danger, and choices that could bind them together, or shatter everything forever.